My name is Eames Demetrios. I'm on the board of the A+D Museum, and I'm a steward of some very beautiful designs. And in my own work, I've created a parallel universe called Chimerics there.
I'm Berfin Ataman. I'm an artist. I make soft kinetic sculpture.
What made you select this project for the awards? In other words, you heard about them, and what made you choose this one?
Well, there was a couple categories, and I had recently documented my pieces on the street outside, and because I like the idea of exhibiting them outside, so I submitted the ones that fit that category. It was kind of a logical choice.
But you chose those pieces because they were kind of fresh on your mind, and you just completed them. They're sort of where
Yeah, they
you
were
were at.
fresh on my mind, and I really liked when we documented them. One of them is in the desert. I just really liked how they fit there. Like it, it looked like they belonged outside rather than inside a gallery or a museum.
Mhm.
So
Cool.
I thought it was a good choice.
Awesome. And then what was the first project that you felt, your first project that you felt represented you as an artist, designer, architect, or however you define yourself? The first project that was really you?
I think it was the Sympathetic Motion series. I think there are four pieces. Two of them are the ones that's showing with A+.
Mhm.
Those were the first four I made together, and they were they represent me the best because it is the it is the latest form of it is the newest way that I'm doing things. I think they represent me with my most recent knowledge of using electronics. It was the first time I started designing my own fabrics for the sculptures. It was actually the first time I made sculptures instead of wearables. So I think they represent me best because it was pivotal for what I do.
Super cool. And then what brought you to this particular field? And before I ask that, do you consider yourself more an artist, a designer, an architect, all those things, something else?
Definitely not an architect. Actually, I haven't studied architecture. I think somewhere between design and art. My education is mostly in design, although now I make art, so somewhere there.
And what brought you there? How did you sort of go from, because I think you studied set design and stuff like that?
Yeah, I it was kind of a windy road. I studied set and costume design in college. I actually wanted to be a set designer, and then I ended up becoming a costume designer. I think it's because I grew up in textile factories because my parents were working in textiles, so I always had this affinity to fabric, even though I never wanted to deal with it as a kid.
Hmm.
So I think it's kind of showed itself when I grew up. Um,
You
and
can't escape your fate.
yeah, I think it just was meant to be. And so I ended up working in costumes for, I think, for 5 years as an assistant designer. And I missed, the film world is very fast. And I missed working with my hands and making things from zero to like
Hmm.
full realization. And so I went back to study fashion, body and garment
Hmm.
at SAIC. Even though I didn't want to do fashion, it was the closest thing that I could study to art with the knowledge I had. So it was like a compromise. And I started making wearables as art pieces and performance pieces. And then I kind of tried a couple things after the school for a year. Um, had my own studio in LA, and then I got accepted to UCLA Design Media Arts, and that's kind of where I learned most of the stuff I use now. Not that I was first forced to learn it, I kind of pushed myself. It was like a program that was art and technology, and I really wanted to learn the technology part. So I learned coding and I learned how to work with motors. And then I carried on my previous knowledge of fabric into it. And I started designing my own fabrics. I had done my own prints before, but I had used other people's photos. So now I did the graphics for it too. And so it was a total knowledge of everything I knew. And I think theater was part of it because my pieces are meant to be shown together and they're quite theatrical when there's five of them together. So I had like this understanding of space that I carried into my art.
And it was actually very stressful watching that that sweet creature that's looking for some air around all those cactuses. I was like very worried that it was going to get in trouble and going to get hurt. It was a little anxiety provoking, I have to say, in a nice way though. And it's going to, because it's waking up or whatever it's doing. And so now, do you think of them as creatures? Do you think of them as abstract shapes? What's in your mind? Are you making an organism, or are you making a sculpture, or a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both. I'm interested in like these systems that we interact with. It's like architectural, natural, or like societal. That we interact with many systems during a day, and I'm interested in how we interact with them and questioning and examining our interactions with them. And I think for those pieces, I was interested in like in the objects we interact with, and we always humanize them.
Mm-hmm.
So we always think they're alive, right? So that was the starting point, and I started thinking what made us this way. Like it must have been like the culture that we grew up in, and the natural instincts too. Like their colors, some of them people don't like the colors. Like there's a red and blue one, people get scared of it. So there's a couple things that are inherited in us naturally, and there's a couple things that come from like the ideas from society and culture that result in our thinking this way. So I was interested in examining this relationship.
But in your mind, when you're making them, are you able to be kind of analytical and know that they're not? Do you humanize them? By the time you're done with them, is it kind of, or not even humanize them, but animalize them or whatever? How do you take? What do you think? What's going on in your head?
I think it goes back and forth. I think I'm part of I'm part of this thing, and I think it's the movement that makes them a bit more alive.
Mm-hmm.
So in the design process, I think I think about design in the way, probably because of my education, like a fashion designer would think, like what's the best way of sewing, there's like all these, like what about shape and form and color and all of these things that go into design thinking. And then at some point after it starts moving, I'm like, okay, it's a bit more creature-like now. So it goes back and forth. And after a while, if I'm with them too long, they become design objects for me again. So
Oh, interesting.
there is a weird relationship.
Exactly. A whole arc. Now, one thing that I thought was interesting is that you showed the reaching for the sun. I think that's what it calls it, reaching or searching for the sun, one in the desert, or what looked like some sort of road. It almost looked like Joshua Tree, but I don't know if that's really where it was. And the and but in your artistic statement, or one of your comments had a lot to do with how you thought these pieces talked about the interaction with buildings and the human environment. What was it like to have it out in the, not the wilderness, but out in nature where it wasn't really having that dynamic?
It was very interesting because they were designed to be in the human environment. I think an outdoor human environment like a park or
Hmm.
something that's more controlled. And we took it to the desert because I a couple people mentioned it to me and it was always in my mind and I was like, okay, let's take it there and see
Hmm.
how it looks like. And it was interesting because it certainly was not of the desert because the motors make sound, but then it has this design aspect with the shape and the colors that actually fit in. Like if it's a photo, it looks like it fits in, and if it's not a photo and you can hear the motors, then you know that it doesn't fit in. And it was because we kind of shot it illegally. Obviously, I'm not like it was a. I think it was a national park or something. So eventually, someone came and told us to leave. But
Were they nice about it, or were they annoyed?
they were nice about it. We didn't like insist either, so we were almost done anyway. And it was interesting because I got nervous when people were around it. I was like, they're gonna think this is real weird. Like, why is there a motorized piece of art in the desert? Um, but after that, I think I'm interested in experimenting a little bit how like these artificial systems I create live in natural systems.
Hmm.
So it's in the thinking process, but there is gonna be an exhibition I hope outdoors at some point.
It was interesting seeing that, because at first what I thought was happening with the motion was the that it was the wind, and then because it had that sort of loosey feeling, and I didn't really know what the wind speed was or whatever, and then I realized it was doing its own thing, which was so it's kind of cool to see it out there. Now, do you see, is this because it's called Sympathetic Motion, right? The whole series. Is that series complete? Are there more coming?
It's four of them, so it's that one in the desert, the one that inflates,
Mhm.
and then there's two more that are harder to show. One is a 9 foot, 9 foot tubular looking creature, I guess, that moves up and down, and then the other one is a 12 foot by 6 foot by 6 foot sculpture that also moves. So they're a lot bigger, therefore harder to show.
Mhm.
But there's four of them, and I think it's interesting to see um, their people's reaction to them because it's also different. What I thought
Mhm.
would be is not what it is, and
Mhm.
it's called sympathetic motion because um, that sympathetic motion is like the secondary motion. So in terms of design, they all have design elements that that are part of the sculpt like yeah that are part of this like the skeleton of the sculpture.
Mhm.
So once one of the skeletons is affected, the rest of them follows.
Oh, cool.
You can see that one best in the 9 foot one. It has these ribs, and once one of them gets pulled up, the rest of them fall on top of each other. So the idea was with sympathetic motion, the name comes
Mhm.
from one motion causing the other.
Mhm. They seem, from a technical standpoint, fragile. I mean, you have to be super careful of them out in the environment, or they kind of, I mean, in other words, like, would you be able to leave them out there for a while, or do you really always have to, you know, nurse them, maintain them, things like that?
I think they're becoming less fragile the more I work on them. The
Uh-huh.
idea is that they're not going to be fragile. I think now the ones that are in A+D, they can be outside and
Mhm.
nothing will happen to them because the electronics in both of them are kind of covered. I think the only thing that could happen is that fabric could get dirty, which
Mhm.
and that's clean. But that,
And what is your next project? What's the next iteration of all this?
um, so there's actually two projects I just finished the drawings in. One of them is a mixture of this project with another project of mine, Island of Doubt. And for that one, it was a lot more complicated with motors and electronics. There was pieces that moved around the room instead of just having movements within themselves.
Mhm.
So I think I want to combine both and think about training them with AI so they can, follow people or run away from them and, react to certain things in the room or if they're outside, certain elements outside. So we'll see.
Are there any artists or designers that did work in the past that you respond to and that you have drawn inspiration from, um, and are there any contemporary ones, or do you feel a little bit um, on your own? How do you feel?
I think there is artists I'm inspired by, but I take parts of different artists because I've studied so many different things. There's, fashion designers that I look at, and there's like Alexander Calder is one of them, and then um, Yayoi Kusama is one of them, and then Rei Kawakubo is one of them, and
Mhm.
it's like most of my forms come from fashion, like knowledge of fashion and
Mhm.
how to work with fabric. Um, so it's interesting. There's a lot of artists that I'm inspired by, but I think mostly I'm inspired by nature, even though my pieces don't directly deal with nature. I think the colors and shapes definitely.
And do you see the next, do you consider an artist that's going to be working mostly in Turkey or mostly in the US or in some other country, or always a lot of different ones, or have you thought about it, or just seeing what happens?
Um, I don't I don't know. I think everywhere is the right answer to that. I have pieces in New York now and some in Korea that are showing, and but right now I'm in the US. I think I don't think I will move my studio to Turkey, but I'll definitely show my pieces here sometime.
Mhm. Do you have different reactions from like your community in Turkey and your community in LA, or is it kind of universal, or?
I think different reactions from each person. It's very much the way they respond to colors and form and movement. It's a part of the way we grow up. Like certain
Mhm.
things reminds us of certain other things that we've seen in the past. So there's an accumulation of knowledge that
Mhm.
lets us react in different ways. I mean, to all art, I'm sure. But but most of yeah, I think
Mhm.
I think most of the people in Turkey I'm close to are family or close friends. So I'm excited to have the opportunity one day to show it to a crowd that I don't know in Turkey. I haven't actually had like a exhibition with these pieces in Turkey. So
That'd be so exciting. It would be pretty cool. And there is an very, interesting art scene there. So it would be very, um, so when you go to a place like Korea, is it mostly presented in the art idea or the design idea? Or I mean, I feel like you're kind of trying to really stay in the middle and not sort of lean too much to one side or the other.
right now they're showing in an art museum, um, but I'm open to presenting them with
Mhm.
either. I think I would love to show my pieces in Asia and other places too.
Hmm.
This is like a new opportunity that I'm trying to
Hmm.
build upon. But I didn't get the chance to go there because of COVID. So,
Because COVID, it's the end of many sentences these days. I thought your point about the colors was very interesting because they are. I mean, I thought they were really great, but I can also, understand that we don't always associate all of them with organic forms and things like that. So, where do you draw that? How do you kind of make those choices?
I think for this series, I was looking at a lot of underwater images, and it was actually a weird combination of shapes and colors. The forms, I designed the forms, and then the colors were not from the same images that inspired the forms. So there's
Mhm.
like an amalgamation of
Mhm.
color combinations versus shapes that are different. And I think that's what makes them so unfamiliar, because if they were familiar shapes with familiar colors, then there would be no, it would be more normal for us. Um, so I was looking at a lot of, I think, sea slugs and shells and corals, and kind of looking at their patterns and getting inspired by them for colors. So some color combinations are from those, and some it was kind of a visual design decision that I'm like, okay, this doesn't work. Let's do the other.
Are you going to design one for underwater?
I've thought about it. I would really love to. I think I need someone that has more knowledge in engineering for that. But yeah, I've thought about putting the inflatable one underwater,
Hmm.
keep like electric parts outside.
Right.
Um, that's something I really want to do.
Yeah. Are you a diver?
No, I'm a surfer. I mean,
Cool.
I have done diving, but I think I'm a surfer more than I'm a
Mhm.
diver.
Yeah, no, I'm a bit more, definitely more of a diver than a surfer. A lot of people, as they talk about their art, there's a political aspect to it. Do you feel that there's something of that in yours, or is that not something that a direction you really find yourself plugged into, or what about that?
I think I'm not. Um, I don't have a political statement or a direction, like, but I think part of me talking about these systems is how they direct us, and it's everything we do during a day is designed and is
Mhm.
part of something, whether that be like the architectural building we live in and our movement through it. And I think that that has some political thinking in it, like why we're affected and how we're affected by them.
Mhm.
Um, but I wouldn't say directly associated with.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense.
And makes a lot of sense. There's so many things dynamic and existing on this planet these days that it's hard to different, parse everything. So, and as you said, there's a comment in all of this that you do in terms of how it relates to the world. So it makes sense. What brought you to the design awards and the A+D museum in general?
I actually met Layla in one of the school shows I did. She came and saw my pieces, and then I got awarded the Rios Clemente Hale Fellowship to show with A+D. So I think that Layla is my biggest connection to A+D.
Oh,
Then
that's a good one.
I really kept in touch with them because they have such a nice team.
Hmm.
Uh, and friendly people. So I follow them, and when I saw the award, I have like this.
Super cool. What do you want the museum to be?
It's a hard question, but I think it should be responsible and fair and diverse, and because art is very powerful, and they hold the key to show art and how to show it. It's very important to decide to show it fairly and um, kind of be I don't know how to say it, be examples for society, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, think about sustainability, all the things that we need in the world and is wrong with the world. I think they can have a comment on, and if they comment on it in the right direction, I think that's. I mean, I guess that's kind of up to the person what's the right direction, right? But in the responsible direction. Yeah.